The man across from me lifted his crystal glass with the kind of smirk that comes naturally to people who've never been humbled a day in their life. "So tell me," he said loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "how does it feel being the guy who married up? Must be nice having your wife bankroll your lifestyle." Laughter spread through the circle of polished shoes and tailored suits, and the loudest laugh came from the person I least expected, my own wife. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, letting their amusement roll over me like a tide of cheap perfume and cheaper egos. The ballroom of the Mirador Regent Hotel glowed under chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls, glass shimmering across white linen tables. Their laughter glimmered just as brightly, stabbing at my pride with every breath. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know. I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who'd thrown the first jab. Rowan Briggs, senior portfolio strategist at Carrigan Wealth Partners, a firm known more for ruthless politics than actual brilliance. My wife, Leora, had worked there for years. Tonight was their annual gala, a night meant to honor excellence in leadership. Though from where I was sitting, excellence seemed to mean arrogance and loud opinions. Rowan wasn't done. Men like him never stop once they've found an audience. "Seriously, Arlen," he said, swirling his champagne like a man auditioning for a role no one wanted him for. "What do you even do all day while Leora is closing deals and carrying this firm? Must be a sweet life. Sleeping in, watching shows, taking long walks while she actually works." More laughter, more smiles, more looks that measured me and found me small. Leora didn't correct them. She didn't reach for my arm. She didn't say a word. That was the cut that bled the most. I kept my posture relaxed, though inside something old and sharp stirred, something I'd buried years earlier. I could feel it rising as Rowan's voice grew louder, bolder. "I mean," he said, raising his glass again, "everyone knows Leora's the star at Carrigan Wealth. And you," he paused for dramatic effect, "you're the trophy husband, yeah? Must feel strange having your wife pay the bills." The laughter this time wasn't just loud, it was roaring. A few people from nearby tables even turned to see the spectacle. I inhaled slowly, the whiskey in front of me suddenly smelling of burnt oak and memory. I'd let this narrative shape me for too long. The quiet husband, the background figure, the man who retired early and never explained why. But being underestimated is a comfortable disguise, until it isn't. Their laughter dimmed as I rose from my chair. My movements were slow, deliberate, the kind that draws attention before a single word is spoken. I looked at Rowan first, because men like him deserve to know exactly when the ground beneath them shifts. "You really want to know how it feels?" I asked quietly. A hush spread across the table. Even the music from the string quartet seemed to fade. Faces turned toward me, expecting another joke, another meek smile, another easy target. But I was done being quiet. "It feels interesting," I continued, "watching a man mock someone whose name he never bothered to research, especially when that name signs off on the fund that keeps his department alive." Rowan blinked. Confusion flickered behind his eyes. Beside him, the managing director, Sylvia Crane, lowered her glass slowly, her brows knitting together as she studied me with sudden calculation. The air in the room shifted, subtly but undeniably. Leora's hand slipped from my arm as if she suddenly wasn't sure she knew the person standing beside her. "Arlen," she whispered, a tremor entering her voice. "What are you talking about?" I didn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, I focused on Rowan, whose smirk was beginning to unravel. "You remember the Meridian Recovery Fund?" I asked him softly. "The one that rescued Carrigan Wealth from collapse 12 years ago?" Rowan's jaw slackened. "That fund," I said, "was mine." Silence detonated across the table. Leora froze. Rowan's face drained of color. Sylvia's eyes widened as if she'd just uncovered a puzzle piece she didn't know was missing. I adjusted my jacket and stepped back from the table. "Next time you want to belittle someone," I told Rowan, "at least know who's been paying the bonuses you brag about." I turned toward the exit, every step echoing against marble like a quiet declaration that the night's balance of power had just changed. But what happened after I walked out of that ballroom, especially with my wife chasing behind me, changed far more than the mood of the evening. It changed the entire future of the firm and our marriage. I barely made it 3 strides into the lobby before I heard her heels. Sharp, frantic taps slicing through the polished silence. "Arlen! Arlen, stop!" Leora's voice chased me, quivering between panic and disbelief. I didn't slow my pace. Not yet. The golden light of the Mirador Regent's chandeliers washed over the marble floors, reflecting the kind of elegance reserved for people who pretend their lives are perfect. Tonight the illusion had cracked wide open. She caught my arm just before I reached the revolving doors, her grip tight enough to betray the calm facade she tried to maintain all evening. "What do you mean that fund was yours?" she demanded, breathless. "You never said anything about owning Meridian." I turned toward her slowly. A strand of her hair had fallen loose, sticking to the corner of her lip. Her eyes, normally sharp, certain, were wide and searching. "You never asked," I said softly. Her lips parted, trembling. "What does that even mean? You've been retired for years. You haven't stepped into an office since I stepped out on purpose," I finished for her. Not because I had nothing left to offer, but because I didn't want to spend my life proving myself to people who only cared about numbers. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Arlen," she whispered, "people talk. They say you haven't worked in years. That you just stay home, that I'm the one carrying us." I didn't know what to say. "You didn't correct them," I replied, holding her gaze. "Not once." Tears surfaced, glistening under the lobby lights. "I didn't know the truth." I exhaled long and slow. "You didn't want to." She opened her mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, she looked away, down at her dress, at the floor, at anything that wasn't me. "It was easier," I continued, "to let people think your husband was just drifting through life. Easier than admitting you married someone who once controlled the fund that saved your firm." Her chin quivered. "Why didn't you tell me? We've been together for over a decade. Why keep something like this from me?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. The lobby hum, tourists checking in, a concierge murmuring directions, faded around us. "Because I wanted to know," I said gently. "If you loved me for who I was when the world thought I had nothing." A tear slid down her cheek. "That's not fair." Neither was tonight. She flinched as though struck. The silence between us sat heavy, an invisible weight pulling our hearts in opposite directions. I pulled my arm from her hand. "Go back inside. You have a gala to finish." Her voice broke. "Arlen, wait." But I didn't. I stepped through the revolving doors and into the cold night air, leaving her standing behind me in a place where appearances mattered more than people. By the time I reached home, the moon hung low over the harbor, glowing faintly against the rippling dark water. My house was quiet. Too quiet. A stillness lived there, one I'd made peace with long ago. I went straight to my study, flipping on the lamp that washed the room in warm amber light. The leather-bound books, the oak desk, the old brass compass from my grandfather. Everything felt calm, predictable, mine. At the edge of the shelf sat a small key. I picked it up, slid it into the concealed compartment behind the filing cabinet, and retrieved a black folder thick with documents, ownership certificates, acquisition agreements, the founding papers of the Meridian Recovery Fund, all signed by me, Arlen Shaw. 12 years ago, when Kerrigan Wealth Partners stood on the brink of collapse, my fund had merged with theirs, pulling them back from financial ruin. Most never knew who their silent savior was, because I wanted it that way, until tonight. A soft vibration broke the room's stillness. My phone lit up. A message from an old friend, Jensen Price, my lawyer and one of the few people who knew the truth. "You ready? The audit is prepared. Once you give the word, it goes straight to the board." I stared at the message. Kerrigan's leadership had become rotten, swollen with entitlement, blind to reality. After tonight, I had no reason left to stay silent. I typed back, "Send it. First thing in the morning." As I set the phone down, a calm settled over me. A storm was coming for Kerrigan Wealth, one they had unknowingly summoned. But the real shock wasn't how the board reacted to my audit. It was how Leora responded when she discovered the war I was about to unleash. A war that could cost her everything she'd built. The following morning arrived with a muted gray sky, the kind that warned rain was coming but hadn't yet decided when to fall. I woke earlier than usual, not because of nerves, but because some part of me had already accepted what the day would become. Downstairs, the house was still quiet, the kind of quiet you only hear right before a storm breaks. My phone buzzed. A notification from Jensen. Audit delivered. Board received everything at 8 in the morning sharp. Expect movement today. I set the phone on the counter, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stared out the kitchen window at the harbor. The boats bobbed lightly against the wooden docks, moving with a calm that stood in stark contrast to the chaos I'd just ignited inside Kerrigan Wealth Partners. I didn't regret it. Not for a single breath. By 9, another message arrived. This time from someone I didn't expect. Leora, what did you do? People are panicking here. Rowan's in a meeting with HR. Sylvia is white as a sheet. Arlen, please tell me you didn't start something you can't stop. I didn't reply. Not yet. The truth was simple. They'd crossed a line. For years, they'd built their firm like a tower of glass. Shiny on the outside, hollow and sharp on the inside. And last night, they'd laughed at the wrong man. My silence lasted all of 15 minutes before the next message arrived. The board just announced an emergency meeting. People are whispering about a secret shareholder. Is that you? Tell me the truth. The truth. She wanted it finally. But wanting the truth and accepting it were two very different things. I finished my coffee in one slow sip, grabbed my coat and headed out the door. 20 minutes later, I stepped out of the elevator on the executive floor of Kerrigan Wealth. It smelled of polished floors, expensive cologne, and the bitter edge of fear. People who once smiled through their teeth at me now watched with wide, uncertain eyes. Whispers rustled down the hallway like a gust of wind. That's him! The guy from the Gala. Is he the one behind the audit? No way. Look at the way he walks. He knows something. The boardroom loomed ahead. Glass walls, walnut table, a skyline view that screamed power. I pushed the door open and every conversation inside died instantly. 5 board members sat around the long table. Sylvia Crane stood at the end of it, tension coiling through her posture like a wire pulled too tight. She stared at me, her expression shifting from confusion to realization. You, she breathed. You're the one who triggered the audit. I took the empty seat at the head of the table, the one no one ever used unless they earned it. I didn't trigger it, I corrected calmly. I ordered it. A ripple of shock spread across the room. The board treasurer, a thin man named Dalford, frowned sharply. And who exactly are you to order a full-scale internal audit? I placed the black folder on the table and flipped it open. Ownership certificates, merger agreements, proof of control. My name, I said, is Arlen Shaw, founder of the Meridian Recovery Fund, majority stakeholder in Kerrigan Wealth Partners. Silence pressed against the walls like a living thing. Sylvia's face drained of color. Dalford's lips parted soundlessly. And someone, I couldn't tell who, exhaled a shaky, stunned breath. You've been, Dalford stammered. You've been the controlling investor all this time? For over a decade, I said simply. Sylvia leaned forward, voice thin. Why stay hidden? Because the firm didn't need another loud voice fighting for space, I replied. But over the years, something changed. Your promotions became political. Your deals became careless. The culture turned toxic while the board looked the other way. I slid a sheet forward, one of many. Executive spending, conflicts of interest, nepotism, all documented. Dalford scanned the page and swallowed hard. Sylvia's hand trembled. Then the door opened. Leora stood in the doorway, breath unsteady, eyes locked on me with a mixture of dread and awe. Arlen, she whispered, why didn't you tell me you were coming here? The room shifted as every board member turned toward her. I held her gaze. Because this isn't about us, Leora. This is about fixing what your colleagues broke. She stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind her. If the board collapses today, my position collapses with it. Do you understand that? Yes, I said. And if I stay silent, the entire firm collapses eventually. Do you understand that? Her eyes glistened, wounded. This wasn't just about her title anymore. It was about her identity, the life she'd built. Unaware it sat on a foundation I'd placed beneath her feet. Sylvia cleared her throat. Mr. Shaw, what exactly do you want? I leaned back in the chair, my chair, and folded my hands. Accountability, I said, and it begins today. But accountability didn't unfold the way I expected, because before the board could act, Someone inside Kerrigan tried to sabotage everything, and the person behind it was the last one I ever imagined. The chaos didn't erupt all at once. It began quiet, too quiet, like the stillness before a market crash no one sees coming until the numbers spill red across every screen. After I declared my intentions to the board, a tense silence hung in the room. They exchanged glances heavy with confusion, fear, and calculation. They weren't just absorbing the truth, they were rearranging their futures around it. Sylvia was the first to find her voice. "We need time to review these documents," she said, each word careful, measured. "If what you're saying is accurate, it changes the entire structure of leadership." "It doesn't change the structure," I said evenly. "It restores it." Dalford wiped his brow with a trembling hand. "Mr. Shaw, we—" Before he could finish, the boardroom door swung open again. This time it wasn't Leora. It was Rowan. His tie was crooked, his cheeks flushed, and 2 HR personnel trailed behind him with clipboards in hand. He looked like a man walking into his own funeral without realizing he'd already been buried. But the moment he saw me, his expression twisted into something ugly, desperate. "You," he spat, "you're the one who started this. You're the one who's gonna destroy everything." Sylvia stiffened. "Rowan, this is a closed meeting. You need to—" "No," he snapped. "They need to hear this, all of them." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "He's lying. He's been pretending to be someone he's not for years. You really think he owns anything? You think some quiet nobody who goes to brunch on weekdays is the mastermind behind a major fund?" He laughed, manic, cracking at the edges. "He fooled you all. I've seen guys like him, parasites, living off people like Leora because they—" "Enough." My voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The quiet carried more weight than shouting ever could. But Rowan didn't stop. In fact, he stepped closer. "That audit," he sneered. "I know for a fact it didn't come from anyone with authority. Someone inside HR tipped me off. The files didn't come through proper channels. They came through—" His mouth snapped shut, but too late. He'd revealed more than he intended. Sylvia's head tilted. "Came through what, Rowan?" He swallowed, and for the first time since walking in, he looked afraid. "What did you do?" I asked him quietly. Rowan clenched his jaw. I just made sure people saw certain things. Look, the firm is delicate right now. I thought if the right narrative spread, maybe—" "The right narrative?" Dalford said sharply. "Are you admitting you tampered with internal documents?" Rowan's eyes darted toward the HR reps. They stared back at him with wide, stunned eyes. "I didn't tamper," he insisted. "I just redirected. Some files were going to legal and I rerouted them to a private server. Look, the place is falling apart. I was trying to get ahead of it." His voice cracked on that last sentence. I leaned forward. "Do you understand what you've done?" He shook his head desperately. "I was protecting us." "No," I said. "You were protecting yourself." Sylvia clicked a button on the boardroom phone, connecting directly to compliance. "I need the internal security logs for the past 24 hours. Access attempts, document redirects, user activity, everything." Rowan's face went bloodless. "Please," he whispered, turning to Leora. Tell them this guy isn't who he says he is. Tell them he can't be—" Leora didn't look at him, she looked at me. "Arlen?" Her voice trembled. "Is it true? Rowan had access to the audit?" My jaw tightened. "That's what he thinks, but Jensen anticipated a leak." I shifted my gaze to Rowan. "The files you saw weren't the real audit." His eyes went wide. "You tampered with decoys," I said. The board members stared at him, their disbelief morphing into something darker. "Betrayal." Sylvia stepped back from the table. "Rowan Briggs, you are suspended effective immediately pending investigation for unauthorized access, data redirection, and possible obstruction." He lunged forward, but HR caught him before he touched the table. As they dragged him toward the door, Rowan shouted over his shoulder, voice cracking under its own weight. "You think he's your savior? He's going to burn this whole place down. You'll see." The door slammed behind him. Silence fell like ash. Leora looked shaken, but not for the reason I expected. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Arlen, if Rowan accessed those files through a private server, that means someone inside helped him." She was right. Rowan wasn't smart enough to orchestrate something like this alone, which meant the rot inside Kerrigan went deeper than even I had imagined. Sylvia turned toward me, her expression hardening with resolve. Mr. Shaw, what do you want us to do next? I breathed in slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into something solid. We clean house, I said. Every department, every decision, every person involved. And that was when the door opened. Once more, slowly this time cautiously. A figure stepped inside. Someone I trusted. Someone I never would have suspected. And the look on their face told me everything was about to get worse. The person who walked into that room wasn't an enemy. Not at first. But what they confessed changed the entire investigation and forced me to confront the one betrayal I never saw coming. The boardroom door opened with a soft click. Nothing dramatic, nothing that warned me my entire foundation was about to tilt, but it did. When the figure stepped inside, every board member straightened. It was Gavin Reese, Kerrigan's chief risk officer, reserved, meticulous, respected by every department. The kind of man who preferred numbers to people, and yet somehow understood both better than most. But today, he looked shaken. Mr. Shaw, he said quietly, nodding toward me, then toward the board. I need to speak. All of you need to hear this. Sylvia gestured him forward. Gavin, please. We've already dealt with Rowan, but if you have information... I do, he interrupted gently. More than I wish I did. He set a thin folder on the table, far smaller than the thick audit files, yet somehow heavier. Leora tensed beside the door, watching Gavin with wide, uneasy eyes. Gavin swallowed hard before speaking again. Rowan didn't reroute those files alone. He had access to a private server because someone high enough in the firm created a back channel. Someone who believed the audit would expose them long before it hurt anyone else. Sylvia stiffened. Who? Gavin hesitated, and that pause splintered the air. When he finally spoke the name, it did not belong to someone in this room. It belonged to someone I trusted, more than I should have. Arlen, Gavin said softly. It was Marcus. The room blurred for a moment, not visually but in meaning. My thoughts stuttered, tripping over themselves. My lawyer? I asked, voice low, disbelieving. Gavin nodded. The leak came from his device. He accessed restricted files using credentials borrowed from our old compliance archives. Rowan merely received what Marcus forwarded. Leora pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. But why would he do that? I already knew the answer. And that was the problem. I'd known Marcus for over a decade. We'd built Meridian from the ground up together. He wasn't just my lawyer. He was my closest confidant. Someone I'd trusted with every secret I ever protected. And he'd betrayed me. Gavin continued carefully, watching me with a mixture of pity and concern. Our internal logs show that Marcus contacted Rowan 2 days before the gala. They exchanged several encrypted files. When I dug deeper, I found transactions, large ones, funneled through a secondary account under Marcus's name. What kind of transactions? Sylvia asked. Gavin exhaled. Kickbacks. Rowan paid him. This realization hit me like a punch to the chest. Marcus, the man who'd helped design the very mergers that built Kerrigan's survival, had been pocketing bribes from the same executive who mocked me publicly last night. Dalford leaned forward, voice sharp with panic. This implicates the General Counsel's office. It could destroy investor confidence if it gets out. Gavin nodded. Which is why we need a decisive response. Internally. Immediately. I stood slowly. The chair scraped back. A low echo that vibrated through the room. Leora watched me carefully, her eyes softening in a way I hadn't seen in months. Maybe years. Arlen, she whispered. Talk to us. What does this mean? I looked down at the folder Gavin brought. Inside were screenshots of messages, transfer receipts, timestamps. A timeline of betrayal carried out behind my back. It wasn't the audit they wanted to sabotage. It was me. Gavin stepped closer, lowering his voice. I didn't want to believe it, but Marcus has been undermining your control for years, Arlen. The more I dug, the more I found. He placed one more document on the table. A resignation letter. Signed by Marcus. Dated for future submission. Rowan was supposed to deliver this next week, Gavin explained, along with an internal memo accusing you of mismanagement of Meridian assets. A slow chill crept up my spine. They were going to push me out. Erase me. Take everything I built. Sylvia broke the silence. Mr. Shaw, what do you want to do? I closed the folder and straightened, feeling something inside me settle. Not anger, not devastation, but clarity. Prepare formal charges. I said. Both civil and criminal. And freeze every account Marcus has tied to this firm. Gavin nodded without hesitation. And Rowan? Dalford asked. He made his choices, I replied. Let the investigation handle the rest. Then I turned toward Leora. She stood frozen, her face a war between sorrow and fierce loyalty. Arlen, she said softly, stepping closer. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I reached for her hand, the first time in a long while. I know, I said. Her fingers tightened around mine and something in her softened. The first crack of humility, or maybe the first breath of understanding. This wasn't just my fight anymore, it was ours. Sylvia cleared her throat. Mr. Shaw, if we're moving forward with restructuring, we need a new leader. Someone capable, someone clean. Gavin nodded. Someone respected by every department. And as they looked at each other, I understood exactly where this was heading. The firm needed a new CEO. And I already knew who it had to be. But naming the new CEO wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. Because when the dust finally settled, the real decision I had to make wasn't about Kerrigan Wealth. It was about my marriage, and whether it deserved a future after everything that came to light. The boardroom felt different now. Not heavier, not lighter, just honest. The masks had slipped, the politics had cracked, and what remained was a room full of people who finally understood the truth about who held the reins, and who never really did. Sylvia folded her hands on the table. Mr. Shaw, the firm can't operate without stable leadership. We need someone trustworthy, someone respected on every floor, someone who actually understands the work, not just the numbers. Gavin nodded. We've reviewed every possible candidate, and realistically, there's only one name that makes sense. He turned toward the door, and there she was, Leora. She hesitated in the doorway, uncertain whether to step in or step out of a story she hadn't known she was living in. Her eyes flicked from me to Gavin to Sylvia and back again. Me? She whispered, stunned. Sylvia gestured toward her. You've built client relationships no one else here has managed in years. You have vision, integrity. And unlike the rest of us, you weren't part of the decisions that led to this collapse. Leora blinked rapidly, visibly shaken. I'm not sure I deserve that after everything. After last night. After what I didn't know. I stood. Not knowing isn't the same as betraying, I said quietly. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Arlen, you told me I never defended you, that I never asked to know more. And you were right. I let people think less of you because it was easier than confronting the truth of what our lives had become. Her honesty struck deeper than any insult Rowan had thrown. I failed you, she whispered. I failed us. I stepped closer, stopping just in front of her. Then this is your chance to rebuild something, not just here with me. Her breath shook. Do you still trust me after everything that happened tonight? I reached for her hand. She hesitated for only a second before letting her fingers meet mine. Yes, I said. I trust you to lead this firm better than anyone here, and I trust you to show me who you really are. Not the version you show the world, the real you. The board watched quietly, not intruding, simply witnessing the moment the roles in this story shifted. Sylvia cleared her throat softly. Shall we put it to a vote? The vote was unanimous. Every hand rose, even Gavin's, steady, certain. And when the final hand lifted, Leora's breath left her chest in a soft, stunned rush. You're the new CEO of Kerrigan Wealth Partners, Sylvia said warmly. Leora covered her mouth with one shaking hand, her eyes filling with tears she didn't bother to hide. Congratulations, I whispered. But this wasn't her victory alone. It was a turning point for both of us. The next 3 months reshaped Kerrigan Wealth from the ground up. Leora did not lead with ego. She led with purpose. Departments reopened their books without fear. Compliance reported directly to her. Gavin oversaw the full restructuring with a precision that steadied the entire firm. And the rot that had spread through the leadership was cut away with a decisive grace I didn't expect but admired deeply. As for me, I stepped out of the shadows entirely, not as the silent investor, not as the underestimated husband, but as the man who finally reclaimed what he'd built. The firm thrived under transparency. Clients returned. Staff felt safe. The financial world buzzed with questions about the mysterious turnaround. But no one outside the boardroom ever knew the full truth. and that was how I preferred it. Some victories don't need headlines. The real test came one evening long after the dust had settled. Leora and I stood on the balcony of our home, overlooking the harbor. The sun had just slipped below the horizon, leaving the water glowing in streaks of deep gold. She leaned on the railing, quiet for a long time before finally speaking. "Arlen," she said softly, "do you really forgive me?" I stepped beside her. "Forgiveness," I said, "isn't a moment. It's a choice you make every day." She turned to me then, eyes shining with something gentle, something earned, not assumed. "Then I'll choose you," she whispered. "Every day. From here on." I took her hand, held it. For the first time in years I believed her, truly believed her. Maybe this was the ending I didn't know I needed. Not triumph over the firm, not revenge on those who mocked me, but the quiet truth that power means nothing if you have no one to share your life with. In the end, I didn't reclaim Kerrigan wealth for myself. I reclaimed it for us, for the future we nearly lost, for the respect we rebuilt, together. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.